Today I'll be talking about what energy is used for, what our main current sources of energy are, why they are unsustainable, a few sources of renewable energy, and how they are being implemented. I'm going to start off by talking about the primary uses for energy in our current society. In the US, we divide our energy usage among four primary economic sectors, which are residential, commercial, transportation, and industrial. Residential and commercial usage, which includes the energy we use in our houses and office buildings, accounted for 40% of all energy consumed in the US in 2015. This includes everything from heating and cooling components, like heating our water, lighting, refrigerators, and other appliances. Moving on, the next sector that took up 32% of all energy consumed in 2015 is industry. This sector primarily uses energy for the process of manufacturing goods. Every product or appliance that we use on a day-to-day basis requires energy to be produced, whether it's gasoline from refining crude oil, cars, buildings, or machinery. The last sector that took up 28% of energy consumed is transportation, which is fairly self-explanatory. This includes cars, airplanes, trucks, buses, trains, and ships. Moving on to our current sources of energy, right now fossil fuels are the main sources. Fossil fuels come in various forms, but the primary ones that we use today are oil and natural gas. Dependence on natural gas is very high among the residential, commercial, and industrial sectors, whereas the transportation sector relies primarily on refined petroleum and diesel fuels. The trend towards renewable sources of energy is slowly improving. This is shown through the 10% energy reliance of the industrial sector on renewables and biofuels, and the diesel fuel and electric car industry growing in the transportation sector. The fact is that fossil fuels are of a limited supply. No matter how many methods we use to find more sources of natural gas, like the environmentally damaging method of fracking, it will always be depleted eventually. The trend is slowly shifting towards making renewable energy a norm to power most of the world. Right now, about 90% of the energy we produce comes from unsustainable sources like fossil fuels. However, we have the capacity to obtain over 80% or more of our energy from renewable sources, and all we have to do to achieve that is education. You might have heard of the acronym WWS before, standing for wind, water, solar, and that's because these are the three most popular and effective methods among renewable energy. Other effective sources include geothermal and biomass. Except for geothermal energy, all of these sources are related to the sun in some way, which is the main source of clean energy on Earth. One of the most debated sources of so-called renewable energy is nuclear power. Some argue that it is because the resources derived from it, such as uranium, won't be exhausted for eons. However, that has been disproven, and furthermore, nuclear waste is a very dangerous byproduct of this, and it takes 10 or more years to just build one of these nuclear plants that won't really pay off the amount of energy we gain for the production costs and the byproducts like nuclear waste that are very dangerous. For this reason, governments don't recognize nuclear energy as renewable, thus it's not eligible for state subsidies. I'm going to start off by talking about solar energy. With solar energy, there are three methods of harvesting this power. The first is photovoltaic or PV cells, which use solar cells made from silicon crystal to convert sunlight directly into electricity. When PV cells are put together, they form a PV module, or a panel, that we typically see on someone's rooftop. The next up is STE, or solar thermal energy, that uses solar energy for heating and cooling for residential, commercial, and industrial uses. Especially in industrial usage, STE is reducing our dependence on imported fuels. Finally, there is a technique called concentrated solar power, which concentrates sunlight through mirrors and lenses to produce electricity. The radiation they concentrate is used as a heat source or directed to PV surfaces to generate electricity. An ambitious project that's in the works, or is still going through the motions, is a solar power satellite that is directly exposed to the sun's radiation and would transmit the generated power into a large antenna on Earth. However, this production cost is too high to justify it so far, but who knows, with the current technology, it might be improved upon and implemented soon. The next type I'm going to talk about is wind energy. Wind energy is harnessed through turbines that are typically grouped together in large open areas called wind farms. Wind energy currently makes up about 1% of all energy produced globally, but the popularity of it is slowly growing. This is shown through examples like Denmark, that have 19% of all their energy produced via wind turbines. One problem that people see with wind energy is the large wind turbines that cause visual pollution among some open areas. But an easy solution for this is offshore wind farms, which basically all that means is a group of wind turbines that are 10 or more miles away from land. So not quite in the deep ocean, but not polluting the scenery or anything around it. The next type of energy I'm going to talk about is hydropower, aka the water in WWS, and this is harnessed through the force of moving water. The typical method for this is to collect water into a dam like a reservoir, and then let it flow through turbines to generate electricity. However, there are high maintenance and construction costs associated with it because of all the material and time it takes to transfer that much water into a dam and construct all the turbines. So damless hydroelectricity has been created. One type of this is called run of the river, where a dam is built to cut straight across a river, creating a mini waterfall where the river runs through the turbines and then back into the lower part of the river. So basically the dam is stuck in the middle of the river and then the water flows through it like it would normally, but it generates electricity along the way. Another type that is an up-and-coming source is called a wave farm, that are collections of wave power generators. They employ buoyant objects that the waves move, and that generates electricity, or wind turbines capture the air fluctuations caused by the moving water. The first one ever built was created in Portugal in 2008 with a 2.5 megawatt capacity, and the technology is getting better every day. Another type of renewable energy is called biofuel. Biofuel is created through biomass, which consists of living or recently dead organisms or biological material like carbon. Some crops are specifically grown for biofuel purposes, and these are called energy crops. There are three main types of biofuel, which are biodiesel, biogas, and bioalcohol. Biodiesel is made through the chemical processing of different oils, which is typically vegetable, maize, soy, or grapeseed oil. That is then mixed with mineral diesel, and this creates the diesel fuel that some cars are able to use. Biogas is generated through the biological breakdown of organic matter without oxygen, like manure, sewage, or green waste, which is basically plant parts that are left over after people harvest crops, like corn husks. Biogases consist primarily of methane. They're rich in methane, which can then be used for heat generation, electricity, or engine fuel. Finally, bioalcohol is produced with the help of fermentation, inducing microorganisms, and that produces fuels like ethanol, which can then be used to power cars, and this is popular in countries like Brazil. The last type of energy I'm going to talk about is geothermal. This comes through tapping the heat of the earth in the form of hot water and steam. Geothermal plants are a hassle to build, but once built, require little operating. This is easier to implement in countries like Iceland, which have a high concentration of volcanoes, making the geothermal energy closer to the surface and easier to access. Thanks to this logic, geothermal energy accounts for 19% of Iceland's energy production. However, the US is actually the leader in this type of energy with a system called dry steam, with an annual capacity of 750 megawatts. In conclusion, renewable sources are sustainable, and that's what makes them so helpful to reduce emissions, reduce pollution, increase biodiversity or prevent biodiversity from being destroyed like deforestation, and creates more green jobs. The leaders in renewable energy right now are Sweden, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Scotland, Germany, Uruguay, Denmark, China, Morocco, and the USA. Costa Rica set a record in 2015 by having 99% of all of their energy produced be renewable, and now the US and the rest of the world strives to do the same. Thank you for listening, and these are my sources.